You know that family secret everyone pretends doesn't exist? Yeah, well, mine blew up at Grandma's funeral. Right between the eulogy and the catered finger sandwiches, my whole life changed. I, 28F, always knew my mom, Rachel, had me young. She gave birth at 16 and raised me alone while juggling high school, 2 part-time jobs, and the judgmental stares of a small Midwestern town. But what I didn't know, what no one told me, was why she had me, or who my dad was. My grandparents, Judith and Marvin, were pillars of our church and community. Think front row pews, bake sales, fundraisers, the works. Everyone adored them. But behind closed doors, they were cold, calculated, cruel in that passive-aggressive, bless your heart kind of way. They always acted like raising me was this heavy cross they bore after Mom messed up. That's the narrative they fed me. Mom had a dumb teenage fling, got pregnant, and the guy ran off. I bought it. For years. Until the day we buried Grandma. After the service, the family gathered at my uncle's house. People were drinking, laughing too loud, playing grief like a performance. I needed air, so I slipped into the den. That's where I found Ida letter, folded into a worn leather Bible Grandma used to carry. The envelope had Mom's name on it, but it wasn't sealed. I wish I could say I hesitated. I didn't. Inside was a single page. My hands shook as I read it. The letter written by Grandma was a confession, a horrifying one. She admitted that Mom didn't get pregnant by some boy. She was raped by a family member. And instead of going to the police or even supporting her, my grandparents covered it up. They forced her to carry the pregnancy, and when she wanted to tell the truth, they bribed her with money, a used car, and a threat. Keep quiet, or we'll make sure no one ever believes you. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't feel my hands. I read it again. The words blurred. That's when Mom walked in and saw me holding the letter. She didn't scream. She didn't grab it from me. She just sat down slowly and whispered, "I knew you'd find it one day." We sat in silence for what felt like hours before she told me the rest. The man who raped her was her older cousin, Brad, 24 at the time. He was living with my grandparents temporarily after a rough patch with his own family. He'd sneak into her room at night. It went on for months. She tried to tell Grandma. Once. That's when they told her she must have tempted him, that she'd ruin the family if she spoke up. When she found out she was pregnant, they panicked, not for her, but for their reputation. Marvin used his church connections to hush everything. They told everyone it was an accident with a classmate. The car they gave her? That was hush money. The apartment after graduation? Bought silence. I was born into a lie. I wish I could say I comforted her, that I said the right thing. But I sat there, stunned, tears running down my face. My entire existence felt twisted, now anchored in violence and deceit. Then came the kicker. She said, "I was going to tell you at 18. But every time I tried, I saw your face, and I saw him." I didn't know what to do with that. What was I supposed to say? I left. I got in my car and drove 3 hours straight to nowhere. I ended up at a motel with flickering lights and the smell of bleach. I stared at the ceiling all night. The next morning, I called my best friend Jasmine. I told her everything. She was the first person I ever said it out loud to. Jasmine asked the only question that mattered. "What do you want to do now?" I didn't know. Still don't. But here's what I did do next. I found Brad. He's married now. 2 kids. Lives one state over. Works at a construction company and posts Bible quotes on Facebook every Sunday. His wife has no idea. His daughters are young, maybe 7 and 9. I watched them play in the yard from my car like some kind of ghost. I thought about telling his wife. I thought about calling the cops, even though I knew the statute of limitations was probably long gone. I thought about confronting him at his job and screaming it in his smug face. But I didn't. Instead, I went home. Back to Mom. She was waiting. She didn't say anything. Just opened the door and hugged me. The longest, most broken hug of my life. Over the next few weeks, we talked. Really talked. She told me about the panic attacks, the self-harm, the way she almost gave me up for adoption. But she didn't. She said, "You were the one thing that made me feel like maybe I wasn't broken." I cried harder than I ever have in my life. Then she asked me something unexpected. "Do you want to tell the rest of the family?" I said yes. The reactions were mixed. Some of them cried and hugged us, said they had no idea and were sorry for judging her all these years. Others, like Uncle Dan, accused her of lying, said she was just trying to ruin Grandma's legacy. He stormed out. So did a few others. But the biggest twist came from Aunt Carla, Grandma's younger sister. She pulled me aside and said, "I always wondered. Your mom changed after he moved in. I asked your mother once if something happened, and she said no, but I didn't believe her. I should have pushed harder." Then she dropped the bomb. Grandma had done the same thing to one of her own sisters in the 60s. History. Repeating. Now I'm sitting here, telling this story to strangers on the internet, wondering what kind of person I am. Wondering if it's wrong to keep this secret from Brad's wife. Wondering if telling the truth would heal or just destroy more lives. So I guess what I'm asking is, AITA for digging into a family secret my mom tried to protect me from? And if I blow it up now, am I a monster or just the only one brave enough to finally break the cycle? 2 days after everything came out, I got a Facebook message from Brad. I hadn't contacted him. I hadn't said a word to anyone on his side. But somehow he knew. The message was short, just one line. "We need to talk. Privately." My stomach dropped. I didn't reply, just stared at it for hours like it was poison. By midnight, he messaged again. "If you're thinking about telling my wife, don't. This won't help anyone. You don't understand what really happened." What really happened? That phrase echoed in my skull like a gunshot. It wasn't an apology. It was a threat, dressed up like concern. I showed the messages to Mom. Her face went pale, then tight like a door slamming shut. "He's scared," she whispered. "He knows he's not untouchable anymore." That night, something changed in her. For the first time since this started, she wasn't crying. She was angry. "We protected him," she said through clenched teeth. "I let them make me feel like I was the one who ruined everything. But you're right, maybe silence is what keeps this rot alive." That was when she told me she wanted to go public. Share her story, not just with the family, but with the world. I was shocked. I asked if she was sure. If she was ready for the backlash, the comments, the way people would pick her apart. "I've lived with shame for 28 years, she said. "Maybe it's time the right person felt it instead." We spent the next week writing her story together. It started as a Facebook post. A long, brutal, raw essay. She didn't name Brad, but she didn't need to. Everyone close to the family would know exactly who it was. She ended the post with this line. "I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for the truth to matter again." She clicked post before I could even say anything. The fallout was instant. Dozens of messages, shares, comments. Some supportive, some vicious. "She's making it up. She wants attention. She's just bitter and broken." But the worst came from Brad's wife, Alyssa. She messaged both me and Mom the next morning. "Tell me this isn't true. Please, tell me he didn't." Mom took a deep breath and replied, "I wish I could." Hours passed. Then Alyssa sent a final message. "Thank you. I believe you. He's gone." That was it. Later we found out she kicked him out, filed for separation, filed a report. She had 2 girls. She said she couldn't let them grow up around a man who did that. Brad's family went into full meltdown. They accused Mom of ruining his life, destroying an innocent man's future, dredging up ancient drama that no longer mattered. But then came another twist. A girl named Tasha messaged my mom. She was 34. Said she grew up in the same church circle as Brad and that he had assaulted her too, when she was only 15. She'd never told anyone. Until now. Tasha agreed to speak to Alyssa and to the police. Suddenly, my mom's story wasn't just a painful memory, Anna Maria, it was a witness statement. Part of a pattern. And with that, the case reopened. Officially. I watched my mom sit through interviews, reliving everything. I saw her hands tremble as she described nights she'd tried to forget. But I also saw steel in her spine I never knew she had. She wasn't scared anymore. Not of Brad. Not of the family. Not even of her own pain. A few weeks later, she stood up in front of our entire extended family at a church potluck and told the story again. Out loud. No stumbles. No tears. It was like watching someone come back to life. But not everyone clapped. Uncle Dan still thinks she's lying. Grandma's best friend, Mrs. Colleen, said, "Your grandmother did the best she could," as if burying trauma was a noble act. But then Aunt Carla stood up. She'd been quiet until then. Now she looked straight at the room and said, "Rachel's not the only one. Judith protected a monster once before. It runs deeper than you all want to believe." That silenced the room. She went on to reveal that another cousin had been molested by a different uncle, and when she tried to speak up, Grandma accused her of being seductive. She was sent to boarding school and never allowed back home. It was like someone dropped a match into a room full of gas. Secrets erupted. People started whispering, connecting dots. Whole branches of the family tree looked like they were built on rotting roots. After that, the family fractured. Some relatives cut ties with us. Others reached out privately with their own confessions. One by one, the lies fell apart. And me? I started therapy. I had to. Everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, my origin was cracked. There are still days I look in the mirror and wonder which parts of me come from him. My eyes, my voice, my tendency to disappear into my own mind. But there are other days I look in that same mirror and think, I'm not his legacy. I'm hers. I'm the daughter of a girl who survived what no one should have to, who protected me even when she had no one protecting her, who could have left me, could have given up but didn't. She chose me, again and again. And now it's my turn to choose her. That's why I stayed. That's why I helped her post that story. That's why I sat next to her in court when they took Brad into custody, not for what he did to her, but for what he did to Tasha, whose case fell within the statute of limitations. I watched him cuffed, sputtering about how this was all years ago, and I smiled. For the first time since reading that letter, I felt peace. He won't rot in prison forever, but his mask is gone. His life, the one he built on lies and silence, is scorched. Mom told me later, if nothing else, I finally feel seen. And for me, that's enough for now. But this isn't the end. Because the truth doesn't stop when someone goes to jail. It ripples. It exposes. It heals if you let it. And maybe the question isn't whether I was wrong to dig it up. Maybe the real question is, how many more daughters are still living under a lie? The night Brad was arrested, I found myself standing in front of the mirror again, this time in Mom's bathroom. She was asleep on the couch downstairs, emotionally drained but peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in years. I could hear her light snoring through the vent. I stared at my reflection, half expecting to feel triumphant, powerful even. But I didn't. All I could think was, now what? Exposing Brad was supposed to be the climax. The confrontation, the reckoning. But life doesn't follow a script. After the headlines fade, after the court dates are set, the Sonna story begins. The slow, aching process of rebuilding yourself from the ashes of everything you once believed. The media caught wind of the case within a week. Not just because of Brad's arrest, but because Mom had been so open online, her post shared over 300,000 times. News outlets twisted her words. One article called her the brave mother who defied the silence. Another one, clearly written by someone from Brad's hometown, called her a bitter woman reigniting trauma for revenge. I watched her read that one. She didn't cry. She just folded the laptop shut and said, I expected worse. But I cried. Quietly. In the kitchen, where she couldn't hear. I wasn't crying for her. Not just for her. I was crying for me. Because I realized I hadn't asked the question that had been rotting in my gut for weeks. Would I even exist if Brad hadn't done what he did? That question haunted me. I tried to bring it up to my therapist, a soft-voiced woman named Marianne with kind eyes and an office that always smelled like peppermint tea. I asked her what it meant to be a child born from something violent. Something so non-consensual. She told me gently that this kind of existential grief was common, but that didn't make it easier. I don't want to hate myself, I told her, but part of me feels like a scar. She looked at me for a long moment and said something I will never forget. You are not a scar. You are the healing. I clung to that sentence like a life raft. I started writing. Not to post. Not to publish. Just for myself. I wrote about growing up under a shadow I didn't know was there. About the smell of Grandma's perfume and how I used to think it was comforting. About the way Mom would grip the steering wheel too hard every time we passed Brad's old house. About the way trauma hides, not just in people, but in traditions, in holidays, in unspoken glances across the dinner table. Then I wrote about the day Mom almost gave me away. She told me the full story one night, over a bottle of wine and too many tissues. I had it all planned, she whispered. Your name would have been Emma. That's what they told me the adoptive parents wanted to name you. Emma Rose. She paused, then looked at me with a strange, bittersweet smile. But then you kicked. She pointed to her belly. Right here. Hard. Like you were saying, don't you dare. And I couldn't. I just couldn't. I cried harder than I meant to. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. I didn't save you, she said. You saved me. There's something brutal and beautiful about that. About two women tied together by blood and trauma, choosing again and again not to give up on each other. We spent that month closer than we'd ever been. We went on long walks, cooked together, watched dumb reality shows. There was this night where we ended up dancing in the kitchen to some old 90s songs she used to love. We laughed until our ribs hurt. But the world outside didn't stop. The court date arrived. Tasha, the other survivor, flew in with her husband. I met her outside the courthouse, and we hugged like we'd known each other forever. Trauma has a weird way of making you feel instantly connected. Like war veterans who fought different battles but understand the same wounds. Inside, Brad looked smaller than I remembered. Pale, hollowed out, like someone who'd finally realized his power had an expiration date. He pled not guilty, of course. His lawyer tried to discredit Tasha, painting her as unstable, emotionally manipulative. But the DA was sharp, had evidence, texts, a journal Tasha kept. It wasn't airtight, but it was enough. Enough to make the judge order a trial. That night, I got another message. From someone I never expected. My father's brother. He introduced himself as Daniel. Said he was sorry. That he had always suspected something, but never had proof. That he'd cut Brad out of his life years ago for unrelated reasons, but always felt something was off. And then he dropped a bomb. I have a letter your father wrote before he died. I think you deserve to read it. I blinked at the screen. Read the message 5 times. Before he died. He was dead. That was the first time I heard it. I didn't know what I felt. Relief? Sadness? Confusion? Anger? Maybe all of it. Daniel offered to meet. Said he could bring the letter. I agreed, and we met at a small cafe 2 towns over. He was older, kind eyes behind thick glasses. Wore a cardigan despite the July heat. He slid the envelope across the table like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I'm not excusing what he did, he said quietly. But he wrote this before he got sick. Said he wanted you to have it if he ever died. I opened it. Inside was a single page. Just a few lines. I don't deserve forgiveness. I know that. I never expected her to keep you. But she did. And I know you're not mine in any real way. Still, if you ever read this, I hope you find peace. Not for me. For her. For you. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it wasn't a denial either. I showed it to Mom. She stared at it for a long time before folding it back up and whispering. That's more than I thought he was capable of. Later that week, the DA called. Said Brad's lawyer was pushing for a plea deal. That he might take responsibility if the sentence was reduced. Tasha said no. She wanted the full trial. But Mom? She hesitated. Part of me wants to see him punished, she told me. But another part just wants to move on. It was the first time I saw conflict in her. Not fear. Just exhaustion. I didn't know what to tell her. It wasn't my decision to make. In the end, Brad rejected the deal. Said he'd rather prove his innocence. The trial date was set. 3 months from then. In the meantime, life moved forward. Slowly. Unevenly. Like learning to walk again. Mom and I started speaking at survivor groups. At first, it was terrifying. But the more she spoke, the more people reached out. Women. Men. People who had buried stories for decades. We heard them all. Held hands. Sat in circles. Cried together. It was healing, but it was heavy. I remember one woman saying, "You never know who's carrying a secret until you say yours out loud." That stuck with me. Because once you speak your truth, you give other people permission to speak theirs. And once we all start telling the truth, shame starts to die. I used to think the story would end with a verdict. With Brad in prison. With the truth exposed. And in some ways, it did end there for the version of us who lived in silence. But endings are funny things. They're rarely clean. Rarely final. They unravel into new beginnings if we let them. Months after the trial, Mom stood in front of a crowd of nearly 300 people at a conference for survivors of abuse. The room was filled with women, men, and even teenagers who had never told a soul until that weekend. Some held each other's hands. Some sat alone, crying quietly. And my mommy, beautiful, brave, unbreakable, Mom told her story. She didn't flinch. She didn't minimize it. She spoke with a voice so clear and steady, I almost didn't recognize it at first. And when she finished, there was a moment of complete silence before the room erupted in applause, in tears, in standing ovation. Afterward, someone came up to her, a woman in her 40s and whispered, "You gave me permission to stop being ashamed." That's what the truth does. It frees people. As for me, I started a foundation. Small at first. focused on trauma-informed education and outreach in rural communities like ours. Because I realized this didn't just happen to use, it happened in towns everywhere. Places where reputations matter more than children's safety. Where secrets are passed down like family heirlooms. We named the foundation Emma Rose. The name Mom almost gave me when she considered adoption. Now, instead of a ghost from a life she didn't choose, Emma Rose is a symbol of choosing to fight, of breaking the cycle. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting, not forgiving the unforgivable, but turning pain into purpose. Brad is still in prison. He doesn't get visitors. His daughters are thriving. Alyssa tells us they're both in therapy and doing better every day. She sends us holiday cards now, sometimes handwritten notes. She's become part of our extended family in a way none of us saw coming. Uncle Dan, we haven't heard from him since the trial. And honestly, that's okay. Some people don't want the truth. Some people are too invested in the lie. Let them stay in the dark. We're building something better in the light. Mom and Roger got married last spring. Just a small backyard wedding. No white dress, no priest. Just laughter, fresh flowers, and the kind of joy you have to earn. I gave the toast. I looked at my mother and said, "You didn't just survive. You rose." She cried. We all did. And now? Now we live. We still carry scars, but we wear them openly. As reminders, as warnings, as proof that we endured, that we told the truth, that we made it out not perfect, not untouched but whole. If you're reading this, wondering if you should speak up, if it's too late, if anyone will believe you, please hear me. It's never too late to tell the truth. It's never too late to break the silence. And you are never alone. You're not what happened to you. You're what you choose to become after. I was born from something horrific, but I refuse to carry shame that isn't mine. I carry strength. I carry her story. And now, I carry my own.